Welcome to your next private lesson. In this lesson, I'm going to explain Nakamura Okinawa Kenpo principles 3, 4, and 5. Now, in this presentation, I'm going to use a PowerPoint. Previously, I just gave you, an oral explanation of the principles, and I decided it would be probably more effective to give you the oral presentation, but also be supplemented with a PowerPoint slide. So therefore, you could read the text as well as listen to my explanation. So I hope you find this valuable, and I'll see you on the next lesson. Nakamura Okinawa Kenpo Principle 3. Postural balance is of the utmost importance. Balance is more important than speed or timing. Speed and timing without balance creates vulnerability. It's important that when you practice and when you execute your techniques and when you fight, to be in perfect balance. The opponent, and if you are the opponent, and you will be, is only vulnerable when the opponent's out of balance. So when you throw a punch or a kick, you need to be in balance at the end of that execution. Because if you're in balance, then when he counterattacks, you're in a perfect position to block his counterattack and respond. So that's why paris work so well. As you know, there's a block and there's a pari. A block is a force-on-force termination of that person's attack. So if the opponent, for an argument's sake, comes down on top of your head, that rising block is opposing force to stop that attack. A pari redirects the force, and that's what creates the imbalance. So when your opponent attacks you and you execute that outward block, if they continue to extend out their punch, it throws them out of balance, and therefore they're vulnerable to attack. You can only attack someone successfully, counterattack someone successfully when they're out of balance. If they're in balance, you'll never, ever execute an effective counterattack. So consequently, that's why you practice, and I have you practice, when you're doing your defensive movement, and once, say, you retreat to a defensive position and there is no opening, you then egress 90 degrees to either side to get off his line of attack. And so that's for you. So when you throw your attack, you need to be in perfect balance so you can overwhelm that person. There is no opening. You should have fluid movement on your attack, whether you're executing punches and kicks as combos or a series of individual techniques. You need to be in perfect balance. Now, balance is very important in fighting, but it's also an important aspect of your entire life. You need to keep your life in balance. That's one thing you need to learn from Okinawa Kenpo, Nakamura Okinawa Kenpo, is that everything in your life needs to be in balance, whether you're fighting, whether you're practicing, or whether you're dealing with adversity in your life. The balance means eating well, exercising, and maintain that constant practice to keep your body in good physical condition, but also emotionally and mentally. You're going to deal with hardships in your life. They're going to disrupt it. And so therefore, you need to keep your life in balance. I learned this myself years ago, going through a divorce with my first mistake. I was working as a police officer, and it was kind of a traumatic time in my life. And of course, when you're in that kind of stress, you don't think properly. You oftentimes don't react properly. So long story short, I'm sitting in the office on Graveyard all by myself, contemplating my woe. And I said to myself, okay, I've got to fix this. I got to put my life back in perspective. How am I going to do that? So I said to myself, okay, what is the most important aspect for the proper execution of technique in the martial arts? And I said, balance. If you're out of balance, you can't be effective. And I said, my life was out of balance. And so I did that. I said, okay, I'm going to put my life back in balance. I'm going to deal with this, but I'm going to deal with it in a balanced way. And I had a much better outcome in that confrontation with my ex-wife than I would otherwise. So balance is very, very important on the attack, on the defense, but also keeping your life in perspective. Good thing to think about. Nakamura Okinawa Kenpo, Principle 4. An efficient fighter has the advantage. Blocks and paris must be executed from the position of origin. No cocking or chambering of the arm. And you see this oftentimes, even with other Okinawan styles. They have a tendency, when they go to throw a downward block, wherever their hand started out at, they drop to their shoulder and then block down. And we don't do that. Wherever your arm is at, that's where the block is executed from, because all that does is create vulnerability for you. So if I was to throw, say, a kick, say a front kick at you, and you were taught to chamber from your on guard position to bring your lead hand up to your shoulder, that creates that 1001, 1002 time frame for me to execute the kick. Because you're basically, when you bring your arm up, you're drawing me in. There's no deflection there whatsoever. And so wherever your hand is, that's where you execute your block or your punch. And you'll see this in the kata. There's no exaggerated movements. Wherever your hand is in its origin, from the first technique to move to the next technique, the block is executed from there. Same with the punch. And so efficiency, of course, to go back to principle 3, makes you a better fighter, because there has to be an opening for you to be attacked. And so you don't provide those openings to your opponent. Nakamura Okinawa Kenpo, Principle 5. Do not retract the strike. A punch returned without a purpose creates the opportunity for a counterattack. The extended arm is positioned for an effective and efficient block pivoted off the elbow, a crescent block. You'll see this oftentimes in Japanese competition, where the Japanese styles will throw the reverse punch and then quickly retract the arm back to the hip for dramatic purposes. This is dangerous. You never want to return a strike until you're in position to execute another strike or kick. So when I throw my reverse punch at you and I keep my arm extended, then when you counterattack, when you block my arm and counterattack me, my hand is in a perfect position to block your counterattack. Same is true if you are attacking with multiple techniques. If I throw a lunge punch, my arm stays extended, and as I step through, it's retracted as the opposite hand is executed. And so you move across the floor, keeping that extended arm out as a physical barrier between you and the opponent, but also a psychological one. You're putting pressure, physical and psychological pressure on your opponent. There is no gap in your attack. It's a continuous flow. So it works both offensively and defensively. It's an important concept to practice. And when you practice, you need to practice throwing that reverse punch and outward blocking, throwing the reverse punch and downward blocking, or throwing the reverse punch and crescent blocking with the outward and downward, or the downward and outward. Same is true when you practice throwing a front kick. You throw your front kick, and when you step down, you execute a downward block or an outward block. And so therefore, your hand's in that position to effectively execute that block in any position that you are, in conjunction with your attack, whether it be at a kick or be it a punch.